Excelsior, true believers! You are about to embark upon a journey, a trip to the 70s and 80s when mighty Marvel Comics ruled over all. The Defenders, Doctor Strange, the Champions, Deathlock, the Submariner, the Incredible Hulk, Killraven, the Son of Satan, the Macabre Man-Thing, and all your other Bronze Age favorites every week appearing on Defenders Dialogue. Now here are your guides, Christopher Golden and Brian Keene.
Excelsior, true believers.
Excelsior indeed, and welcome back once again to Defenders Dialogue. I'm Brian Keene.
And I am Christopher Golden. And Brian, today we really discuss Giant Size Man-Thing number 4.
That's right.
Which has, I think, one of the coolest covers of any Man-Thing story. I love this cover. It's so cool, creepy.
I love everything about this issue, and I can't wait to talk about it. Do you remember, Chris, we've been doing this show 4 years now. Do you remember how giddy and excited I was when we got to the Headman Nebulon saga in the Defenders?
Yes.
I am as giddy and excited today.
Wow, that's saying something.
Yeah, when we began covering the Man-Thing, when we did Adventure into Fear issue 12, which was written by Steve Gerber, art by Jim Starlin, I told the story about how my first introduction to Man-Thing was 2 issues back to back. It was that issue of Adventure into Fear and this issue we're covering today, Giant Size Man-Thing number 4.
Okay.
And probably more than any other comic, this is the one right here. Little Brian, 8 years old, reads this, and it's just like, yeah, this is what I want to fucking do when I grow up.
Excellent. Well, then it will sadden you to know that as someone reading the collected, the Man-Thing by Steve Gerber, the complete collection, volume 2, that my collection does not include the Howard the Duck backup story.
Oh my God!
So we will have to wait for when we cover Howard the Duck.
Oh, that's criminal. This was my first introduction to Howard the Duck. I didn't know about his previous appearance. I just, I finished the Man-Thing story and I turned the page and here's this story about this Donald Duck looking motherfucker who's smoking cigars and lands in Cleveland. And, he's a victim of police brutality and it's just so great.
Well, I thought there was a strange resonance here too, because on the cover, it says, Extra, Howard the Duck faces death at the hands of Gorko the Man-Frog.
Which is a typo.
It is.
Yes, because in the story itself, the villain's name is Garko with an A. Garko the Man-Frog.
Oh, see, I saw Gorko the Man-Frog, and it immediately made me think of Grogu, a.k.a. Baby Yoda. Who is sort of a man-frog in some ways.
He is sort of.
Anyway, Brian, take it away, my friend, because you're so excited. I don't want to dampen your excitement.
So, Giant Size Man-Thing, issue number 4, of course, written by Steve Gerber. The art this time is a team-up. Ed Hannigan and Ron Wilson with Frank Springer on inks. We open in the afternoon in the Florida Everglades, but it doesn't look like afternoon. It's pitch black, and lightning is just ripping apart the sky, and there's a wind that's just shredding trees and moving everything except the Man-Thing. He's hanging out, and he senses that this storm is unnatural. His empathic nature probes past the storm itself and knows that the tempest is an expression of outrage on the part of the elements. Unfortunately, there are innocent victims of this outrage, such as the deer that has a tree fall on it. Doesn't kill the deer, but being an empath, the Man-Thing rescues the deer and then stands there amidst the storm and is feeling called towards a funeral. Take it away, Chris.
So I just want to say that I feel like it's entirely possible that this deer is well-traveled and is indeed a deer that the Hulk is friends with around the same time.
Bambi,
yes.
Yeah, Bambi, the pet deer in the Defenders, who we covered, who unfortunately ended up becoming the unwitting pawn of the headmen. Had Chandu's brain transferred into its body, if I recall correctly.
Oh, God.
By Doctor Strange.
All right, so he saves the deer. And that was a great scene. Again, I think, by the way, we should mention also that the artist who did the cover that I love so much is Frank Bruner.
Yes.
But anyway, after he saves the deer, he's wandering off, and of course, the Man-Thing sort of navigates not by the stars, Brian, but by emotion.
That's
and
right.
He feels himself drawn to a swamp-side funeral happening in the middle of a rainstorm, which seems unlikely to me, but it makes for excellent visuals.
It was 1975, Chris. Yes, and this funeral is for 17-year-old Edmund Winshed, who died, obviously way too young, 17 years old. And we spend, very similar to what would happen later with The Watchmen, we spend several panel grids meeting the members of his family, his father, Oliver, his mother, Marie, his uncle, Samuel, his aunt, Eleanor, who it turns out is only a few years older than Edmund, his grandmother, Margaret, and his gym coach, Louis Milner. And, the preacher is talking about how Edmund touched all these people's lives and how they touched Edmund's lives when a young woman stands up at the back of the funeral and calls bullshit on all of this. She says, he hated you. He hated all of you. You're all murderers. You killed him. And
yeah, and you have the gall to call it your tragedy. So she's furious because of this theatrical performance of the mourners and the preacher, because they're all talking about how much they've lost and how it's their tragic loss, and she loses her shit and calls them out. Yeah.
And lest you think this is a troubled young woman who is ruining this mourning family's funeral, the next page, Uncle Sam lets you know that, maybe she's right, because he says, somebody tell that crazy broad to shut up before I punch her teeth out.
Yeah. And then a few panels later, he does punch her right in the jaw.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he beats her, takes her out in the swamp, throws her into the swamp, and tells her, I don't care if you drown, but don't come back to the funeral. We then learn that this young woman's name is Alice Rhymes, and she seriously considers letting herself drown. Although Gerber doesn't explicitly say so here, I think it's clear from the dialogue later in the story, this young woman is probably suffering from chronic depression. She's been bullied, much like we'll find out Edmund has. Mm-hmm. She's thinking about, fuck it. I'm just going to go ahead and die here. But before she can, the Man-Thing shows up. And she sees him and she screams, and that interrupts the funeral again. And this time, everybody goes charging out, but Uncle Sam goes charging ahead, and he is gleeful at the violence he is going to bestow upon.
He says, that crazy little, I'll pound her ugly little face in, I'll break every bone in her body. So he's clearly a very gentle, understanding man. Anyway, so he goes charging out, as you said, to basically murder her.
Yeah. And he's in the midst of doing that. I mean, he's pounding this young woman when suddenly the Man-Thing grabs his fist, and the uncle looks up and he knows fear. And what happens to anything that knows fear, Chris?
Well, Brian, when the Man-Thing touches anything or anyone who knows fear, they feel spectacular joy and happiness. I think they win the lottery. we may have mentioned once or twice that whatever noosphere burns at the Man-Thing's touch.
That's right.
I will say I want to go back to talk about this uncle for a second, because prior to the moment where he burns at the Man-Thing's touch, Gerber describes him. It says, Samuel Pender despises the young woman completely, the way some humans loathe snakes or insects. Her plain, unbeautiful face, her unspectacular, indeed barely noticeable shape, what has she to offer the world? So because she's not pretty and doesn't have a nice body, she's worthless, and he wants to beat her to death.
Yes. That's who we're dealing with.
Making sure we understand this correctly.
That's who we're dealing with. So he burns the uncle's hand, and the rest of the family show up, and they gather before the Man-Thing, and then again we get that panel grid, and Gerber tells us bullets can do little to harm the Man-Thing, but they have a far more potent weapon at their command, and their faces are livid with its power. And he is, of course, talking about hatred. It's a psychic screw twisting slowly, painfully into the Man-Thing, and that forces our hero to retreat.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting, because that's the first time in all the issues we've covered that anything like that happens.
Mm-hmm.
That, that the force of these 6 or 7 people's hatred, instead of fear, instead of grief or anything like that, instead of drawing the Man-Thing, it drives him off.
Yes.
I thought that was an interesting twist.
I did too. We then transition to 3 days and 3 nights later, and we're told that it has continued to rain that entire time. But now it's Monday, and the storm is over, but the dark clouds still hang over Citrusville, blocking out the sunlight. And Alice returns to school. And what I like about this page here, Chris, when it shows her walking down the hallway of Citrusville High School, very, very clearly Hannigan and Wilson have drawn Steve Gerber into the comic. That's him there in the Miami State sweatshirt.
Okay.
But yeah, it turns out Alice has Edmund's secret diary. And a lot of people seem to think it says things about them in it. One of those people, of course, is the coach, the gym coach. And he confronts her about it, and he tells her, that diary could get a lot of people into trouble. Maybe it's libel. And when she refuses to give it to him, he pulls back his fist. He's going to punch her too. And she says, would you like to hit me? You may if you like. I won't mind. I can't really feel pain anymore. And then she just walks off.
Well, she's planning, Brian, to publish the entirety of the contents of this in this year's literary magazine. She says, assuming that the committee has the guts to publish it, assuming you have the guts to read it, we continue on.
Right. She meets with the committee. And I thought this part was brilliant because, she says, I'm going to read you Edmund's words for himself. This is his diary. And when she opens it, the comic book changes. Rather than a traditional comic book, what we have here is prose interspersed with illustrations. I was 8 years old, and I remember turning the page and getting to this. And at first I thought it was some Marvel house ad or, a bullpen bulletins page written by our friend Scott Edelman. And then I realized, oh wait, no, this is part of the story.
And we should say that, that Gerber has done this stuff. Gerber had done prose stories in the black and white magazines.
Yep.
Prior to this, he'd done them in a number of places. But I think this is the first time that there's this much prose in the middle of a regular comic.
Exactly. Unfortunately, I know you'll know who I'm talking about, but for listeners who don't, one of my best friends was an artist known as Gak, and he didn't do comics. He was known as a book cover artist in the horror genre. But Gak and I, both being fans of this comic, we had pitched a book that would do this. It would start out as a graphic novel, and then it would slide into prose, and then it would slide into illustrated prose, and back into a comic. We had started working on it. Unfortunately, he got early adult onset dementia. He passed away, I guess, 2 years ago now. So we never got a chance to finish. One of my great regrets in life, that we never got our chance to pay homage to this, what Gerber does here, exactly what he does here. But yeah, he opens with Edmund talking about, Richard Rory, our cast member, Richard Rory. He listens to, Richard on the radio and listens to him talk about the Man Thing. And, Edmund feels an empathy with the Man Thing, because he's even uglier than Edmund is told that he is. Bulkier, clumsier, more misshapen. What we come to find out is that Edmund is overweight, and everyone in his life, except Alice, bullies him for that.
I want to say, too, I thought this was really interesting because it's a really interesting predecessor to 13 Reasons Why.
Yeah.
Because that's what this is. It's him basically calling out one by one the people who made his life so miserable that he wanted to die.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. And, we're not going to read the whole prose story. But, it starts out with his birth. His father didn't want a kid. His mother wanted a daughter. So he was a disappointment to both of them. When he's 4 years old, he gets a little pretend cooking set, which he enjoys. And, his uncle belittles him for that. Takes the cooking set out of his hands, puts a hammer in his hands, and says, that's what a man should hold in his hands. Everybody just bullies this kid. When he gets to high school, a couple things happen. His uncle marries Eleanor, who's much younger. In fact, she's only 7 years older than, Edmund, and they hit it off, and then Eleanor and Alice both become his friend. But his uncle thinks there's something going on between him and Eleanor, and his uncle beats him up.
Yeah, he also has the thing about the gym teacher.
Yes, yeah, the gym teacher's bullying him as well. Yeah, he and Alice do hit it off though, and they kiss, and, they're in love. But then there's an epilogue, and it's written by Alice because it's written after Edmund died. It turns out the gym teacher made him run laps. And after 30 minutes, he's still running laps. He drops dead of a heart attack. The last thing he sees in the world is the gym teacher kneeling next to him, screaming, get up on your feet and finish your laps, fatso.
Yeah. You know what? And again, I know we're not this is not what it's about, but, I read this and I think about how much we still see of this in boys' youth sports. It's just amazing to me. You see reports all the time of coaches who finally somebody speaks out about the way the coaches behave.
Yep.
And all that. So it really is, it's so fascinating to me to go back and read these comics and then think about how they resonate today.
Well, even back then, I remember reading this back then, 8 years old, and my dad wanted me to be a jock. Now, Chris, you know me, I am not a jock. I can fight, but I'm not a jock. I don't enjoy playing sports. And, he'd make me go out for football. He'd make me go out for baseball. He's trying to find something that I would enjoy doing. And I used to see shit like this all the time. And at 8, you don't know how to verbalize your concerns about it. But then I sat down, I read this comic, and I'm like, boom, head explodes. This guy Gerber, he gets it, man.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I played sports when I was little. By the time I got to high school, I was done with that. But I played, I played Little League. I played this intramural Catholic school basketball league. I played one half a season of Pop Warner football And I did that because my mother desperately wanted me to play football. But because I was so tall for my age, they actually put me in with the older kids.
Right.
So they bumped me up an age level, and I'd never really played football before. So there I was, at a time when growth, is everything, getting my ass handed to me and hammered every single time we had practice by these kids who, were a little bit bigger, but at least a year and a half probably older than I was.
Right.
And, does that make you want to play sports? No. You know what I mean? So I was like, no, I'm done with this bullshit. Like, this is ridiculous.
The only varsity sport I was ever involved in was cross country. I liked cross country because you in effect you did it by yourself. You were out there running. There's nobody else bothering you or yelling at you, and I quite enjoyed that, and I was pretty good at it. But yeah, I knew this coach, and it sounds like you knew this coach too. And yes, in 2021, these coaches still exist.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Alice finishes, and the committee debates what to do, and I find this panel interesting. The first teen says there was nothing anybody could do, and the second teen says, well, one of the jocks could have made the coach stop, and another character says, well, they didn't feel it was their responsibility. So they're debating whether to include it or not, and while they do that, Alice leaves, and she's going to put the diary in her locker, but before she can, she's abducted. She passes out, and that leads us to the finale, Chris.
Yeah, part 3, the final silence. She's basically been dragged out to the gym, and she is strung up in the gym in a very Twilight Zone-esque weirdness. Her hands are somehow tied into the gymnast rings that hang from the ceiling.
Yep.
And all of the people we saw earlier at the funeral are there, and they've jointly gathered together to basically torment her. Simultaneously, while all of this is happening, Brian, her anguish is so great and familiar to the Man-Thing that he can feel it from a distance and makes his way to the high school.
That's right. So, they're threatening her, and it's everybody. It's even Grandma is there, and they want the combination of that locker. And Alice tells them, no, before I woke up, Edmund came to me in a dream, and he told me not to give it to you, and the adults are debating what to do with her. Should they torture her to get the combination? Should they let her go? And the coach says, listen, we've got to get that diary and burn it. And Alice, reaches out to Aunt Eleanor and says, why don't you say something? You know the truth, or are you too afraid of your husband? That's important, and we're going to come back to that in a moment. But yeah, the Man-Thing shows up outside Citrusville High School. Long story short, he comes in. The first thing he finds is the janitor, who is waxing the floor with one of those lawnmower looking
This is my
things.
favorite panel in the whole comic. One of those big,
go ahead and describe it.
waxers that you've definitely seen somebody using, and the Man-Thing picks it up and hurls it into the gym, where it lands on Cousin Oliver and crushes him to death.
So yeah, the dad is down, killed by a floor waxer.
You know what also makes me love this scene so much is, in a weird way, it reminds me of the opening segment of Creepshow. I want my cake, Bedelia.
Very much so.
Man-Thing coming in to just systematically murder everybody there. Anyway,
and he does. Gerber does not pull his punches this time. He kills the father. The next one he grabs is Aunt Eleanor, who would not speak out before. His hand covers her mouth, and because she's afraid, her mouth burns, and now her lips are sealed forever. Boy, there's some poetic justice.
Yeah. That reminded me of the Spectre, too, but go ahead. Yeah.
Very much so, yeah. The uncle is next. The uncle takes a swing at the Man-Thing. The Man-Thing picks him up, swings him like a bat, and breaks his spine.
Yeah, on the gymnastics equipment. That was great.
He sort of backhands mom and grandma aside.
Yeah, this is definitely the Man-Thing at his most brutal.
Yeah. And then he reaches the coach. And this is the part I love. The coach, the one who actually murdered Edmund, clasps his hands together in prayer, in pleading, and the Man-Thing fuses his hands together, burning him, but he's not done. He drags the coach out of the school. A quick aside, the teenagers free Alice, and as they're taking her outside, she seems to think that the Man-Thing is in fact Edmund, or perhaps possessed by Edmund, and she pleads with him not to do what he's about to do. But it's too late. They reach the coach. Not only have his hands been fused together, but, quote, something burned right through his heart, through each layer of skin, through the bone, into the throbbing muscle itself.
Yeah, love it. Absolutely love it. All right, well, listen, I think that's the end of that issue. I want to just say for the record, we're going to do 17 and 18 next episode, right?
Yep. We're almost done with Man-Thing, folks.
Yeah, we're getting to the point where we're going to finish up with the Bronze Age Man-Thing and in a few episodes. And we talked before about what we wanted to do, and I think we should lay it out for folks at this point, unless you've changed your mind. When we're done with Man-Thing, we're going to cover the two Legion of Monsters stories.
Exactly.
One of which was in... now I'm forgetting, Brian. There was a magazine special.
Monsters Unleashed.
Yes.
It was in Monsters Unleashed, and then their second appearance was, I believe, Marvel Premiere. While Chris is grabbing it to double check me on that, Legion of Monsters, for those of you who are unfamiliar, was a very short-lived, very weird super team consisting of Ghost Rider, the Johnny Blaze Ghost Rider, the Man-Thing, Morbius the Living Vampire, and the Werewolf by Night. Now, Morbius and Werewolf we haven't really covered on this show yet, but if you listen to the show, of course, from Champions and Defenders, you know Ghost Rider, and now you know Man-Thing.
Yeah, so now for those of you, to give you the opportunity to acquire these, if you'd like to read along with us, you have 3 or 4 weeks in which to, maybe 3 weeks or so in which to acquire them. It's Marvel Preview number 8, which is a magazine size,
right,
featuring Legion of Monsters, and then Marvel Premiere 28, which is a regular comic book size featuring. And we've got to cover these. These are great, so much fun. And so we're going to just take to take us off on a tangent. We're going to do those 2 issues as a really fun thing, and Brian and I are both going to wear our Legion of Monsters T-shirts while we record that episode because we are geeks.
Today, in fact, I'm wearing my Morbius T-shirt.
You have your Morbius shirt on. I don't remember which shirt I'm currently wearing here.
Chris is stripping on camera.
Oh, I'm wearing a Werewolf by Night T-shirt at the moment.
Oh, there you go. So we have 2 members.
2 members of the Legion of Monsters represented at the moment. In any case, and then after that, what we talked about doing, and we'll talk about exactly how we're going to arrange this afterwards, is we're going to start dipping into both Marvel Team Up and Marvel 2-in-1. Marvel Team Up starring usually Spider-Man and whatever character they decided that month was going to be working with him. And Marvel 2-in-1 following the same pattern, only with the Thing as the monthly anchor character.
That's right. And we're going to alternate back and forth between those.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we will occasionally be taking sidetracks and delving back in. I know a lot of people have asked about what about the 80s Man-Thing run with Chris Claremont, which ran for 11 issues. Yes, we will eventually get back around to that. But we're going to take a break because the Man-Thing, he's always about the supporting cast.
Right.
So we want to get back to more active participant stories for a little while.
And also, frankly, we want to spend a little bit more. Again, it's been great, especially because I had not read 95% of these issues of Man-Thing. It's been a blast for me, and I'm looking forward to wrapping it up. But I love talking about the Bronze Age Marvel universe and all the crazy characters and the crossovers and all of that stuff. And to me, that's sort of the pinnacle of that, aside from Defenders, is in Marvel 2-in-1 and Marvel Team Up, where anyone can show up at any time.
Yep, exactly.
You can have Kazar in one issue, Jack of Hearts the next, the Living Mummy in the next issue. It doesn't matter. It's whatever the hell they want to do.
You know what else I loved in Bronze Age? And we've talked about it before. I love the letters pages. And I have a surprise for you this week, my friend.
What's that?
We got, and I'm holding it up so you can see it, our very first written fan letter to Defenders Dialogue. Now, people tweet us all the time, and we see those. Don't always get a chance to answer them, but we do see them. Folks talk to you on Facebook. Folks email me. But this is the first time in the history of the podcast that someone has sent us an actual honest-to-goodness letter, and I would like to read it to you on the air right now.
All right, please do.
Says, Dear Defenders Dialogue, I apologize for contacting you via physical mail, but I haven't been able to find a Defenders Dialogue specific email address. Yeah, that's true. The easiest way is just tweet us, folks. He goes on to say, I'm not in the habit of writing fan letters. I mean, I did once write a letter to Marvel Team Up, but I never sent it. I just get such genuine joy out of listening to Defenders Dialogue that I felt the need to let you know. I'm a recent convert to the show, initially just intending to listen to the episodes covering Steve Gerber's run on the Defenders, but it was so much fun that I said fuck it and hunkered down to listen to the show from the beginning. Knowing that I have Supervillain Team Up and Man-Thing episodes to look forward to leaves me at a loss for words. The Defenders was my absolute favorite Marvel book of the 70s, both in fact and in recollection. I'm 53 years old, same age as us, Chris.
We are, yep.
And discovered the group in Marvel Feature and followed it religiously as I could, given the erratic distribution of comics in my area, up until the beginning of the Tunnel World saga. Which we've talked about.
It's the only time we ever covered 5 issues in one episode.
That corresponded with the end of 6th grade and the end of my interest in comics and the beginning of my discovery of bands like Iron Maiden, Saxon, and Angel Witch. While that's a logical progression, it's neither here nor there. What I love about Defenders Dialogue is the obvious affection that you and Chris have for the books you discuss. But it's not a slavish fanboy love. You take just as much delight in pointing out the ridiculous aspects of the Defenders and 70s Marvel comics in general as you do in pointing out the tiny, poignant moments of character development. Marvel comics in the 70s were written for kids, but never written down to kids. At heart, even the socio-political stuff Steve Englehart was doing in Captain America or Gerber in the Defenders and Man-Thing was secondary to the superheroic soap opera that was Marvel Comics. It's a razor's edge that, for the most part, Marvel writers succeeded in walking upon. I didn't get a lot of the more topical themes when I was a kid, but they affected me nonetheless, simply through osmosis. You guys have mentioned several times on the show, or I guess this part is for me. You've mentioned several times on the show that living in rural Pennsylvania, you didn't know many people of color. I'm not sure where exactly you grew up in PA, but I grew up in the Slate Belt, the small town of Rosetto, and had the same experience. The only difference being that it was Flip Williams, John Evans from Good Times, and the Falcon, who were my experience of black culture. Reading Captain America and the Falcon, I just assumed that those two were best friends, and that was the way the world works. I want to thank you and Mr. Golden for the literal hours of enjoyment you've provided. It's like hanging out in your friend's basement or sitting next to two guys having a really interesting conversation at a bar. Keep the episodes coming. Oh, if I can be a fanboy for just one moment, the two of you should do Marvel 2-in-1 next. Great book with some great highs and lows, much like Defenders. Thanks, Chris Caponigro. Chris, I'm pretty sure I mispronounced your last name, Caponigro. But you are very welcome, my friend. Thank you for that. And your wish is our command. As we just said, we'll be getting into Marvel 2-in-1.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you for reading that. That's great. It makes me so happy again, as I say, every time I encounter someone we don't actually know in person who listens to this show, first, I'm astonished. And second, I just love it. I love the idea that, we do this. We get no money for doing this. We do this purely for our own pleasure and entertainment. It's fun to talk about all of these things that gave us joy. And if we can distract people from the world and remind them of that feeling, then that's a gift for us,
Absolutely.
That's great. So we're going to do those 2 issues of Legion of Monsters, Marvel Preview 8, Marvel Premiere 28, and then we're going to switch back and forth between Marvel 2 and 1 and Marvel Team Up. We'll talk about the numbers at that time. And I'm super excited.
I am too. We'll have to, it's probably a discussion for off the air. I was going to say, we've done some issues of Marvel Team Up already on this show when they crossed over with the Defenders.
Yeah.
We'll have to figure out if we want to redo them in the new context or not.
Yeah, I mean, we may just sum them up.
Yeah.
When we get there.
All right, folks. Well, again, thanks to Chris for taking the time to write us that letter. Thanks to everyone that listens. We appreciate it. The best way to show your appreciation is to help out our producer and our engineer, Matt Wilderson. He does this every week for us. And, he doesn't have to, but he does. He's always there. He makes us sound good. You can support him by going to Amazon.com, typing Matt Wilderson, Wildasin in the search bar and buying one of his books. And hey, then you'll find a new writer whose work you enjoy as well.
Exactly. We appreciate Matt, and we appreciate all of those who support him because that helps the show.
Exactly.
All right, Brian. Well, listen, that was a good one, and I look forward to next week.
That was a good one. Excelsior to you, my friend.
Excelsior to you and to Chris and everyone else who listens, the other 3 people who listen.
See you next week, folks.
Defenders Dialogue. You can listen to this episode and all previous episodes for free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play Music, and wherever else podcasts are available. Defenders Dialogue is written and produced by Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Our theme music is by Xander Harris. Our engineer is Matt Wilderson. Check out his books on Amazon.com.